The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the quiet corridors of Chicago General Hospital's maternity ward, where Sarah Miller's footsteps echoed through the midnight silence. Her 15 years of experience as a night nurse had taught her that no two nights were ever the same, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold. Through the large windows, she could see the city lights twinkling against the backdrop of a cloudy December sky, while the subtle beeping of monitors created a familiar symphony that usually brought her comfort. Sarah paused at the nurse's station to review the charts of the 6 newborns under her care, paying special attention to the newest arrival, a premature baby girl born just hours ago to a young violinist named Emma Chen. The sound of something scratching against the floor made Sarah lift her head from the paperwork, her trained ears immediately alert to any unusual noise in her ward. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to distinguish between normal hospital sounds and those that required investigation. And this sound definitely fell into the latter category. Rising from her chair, Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she caught a glimpse of movement at the end of the corridor, a sleek, graceful figure slipping through the shadows with deliberate purpose. The security guard had just completed his rounds 10 minutes ago, and Sarah knew every member of the night staff by sight. This was something, or someone, that didn't belong. Sarah's instincts kicked in as she moved quietly toward the nursery, her rubber-soled shoes allowing her to move almost silently across the polished floor. The scratching sound grew louder as she approached, and her mind raced through various scenarios, none of which prepared her for what she found. Through the nursery window, Sarah froze in disbelief. A beautiful Siamese cat with striking blue eyes sat perfectly still beside Emma Chen's baby's crib, its tail wrapped neatly around its paws as if it belonged there. The cat's presence was impossible. The hospital's security was strict, the doors were automatic, and the building was supposed to be completely secure. Yet here it was, this elegant creature, wearing a worn leather collar, staring intently at the sleeping newborn. Time seemed to stand still as Sarah observed the surreal scene before her, her hand hovering over the emergency call button. The cat showed no signs of aggression. Rather, it displayed an almost protective demeanor toward the infant. Sarah's eyes darted between the sleeping baby and the mysterious feline visitor, noticing how the cat's ears perked up at every tiny sound the infant made. Something about this situation felt strangely familiar, tugging at a memory she couldn't quite grasp. The name on the worn collar caught her attention, Maestro, and suddenly, Sarah remembered something Emma had mentioned during her admission between contractions, something about losing her beloved cat just days ago. Through the window, Sarah watched as baby Emma stirred in her sleep, letting out a tiny whimper that would normally go unnoticed by anyone but a trained nurse. To her amazement, the cat responded with a soft, reassuring purr, and the baby immediately settled back into peaceful sleep. In that moment, Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, not just a random incident, but a reunion that defied explanation. Her years of experience had taught her that sometimes the most meaningful moments in life came disguised as ordinary events, and as she reached for the nursery door handle, she knew this night would change more than just her routine. Emma Chen sat in her hospital bed, her fingers unconsciously moving through the air as if playing her beloved violin, a habit she'd developed over 20 years of dedicated practice. The steady rhythm of the hospital machines couldn't quite drown out the melody playing in her head, the same piece she'd been rehearsing when her water broke 3 days ago. At 32, she had finally secured the position of first violin in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, only to have her baby arrive 6 weeks early, throwing her carefully orchestrated life into beautiful chaos. The room was filled with flowers from her orchestra colleagues, their sweet fragrance mixing with the sterile hospital air, but Emma barely noticed them as she stared at the empty carrier in the corner, the one she'd bought for Maestro 3 days ago. Everything had changed in a matter of hours. She had been practicing Tchaikovsky's violin concerto in her apartment when the first contractions began. Maestro, her constant companion for the past 8 years, had been acting strangely all morning, meowing incessantly and refusing to leave her side. When she finally admitted she needed to go to the hospital, in the chaos of calling the ambulance and gathering her things, Maestro had slipped out the open door. The last thing she remembered seeing was his blue eyes staring at her from the end of the hallway before disappearing. Now, as she lay in her hospital bed, the guilt of losing him mixed with the overwhelming joy and fear of premature motherhood weighed heavily on her heart. The quiet of the night shift was interrupted by a soft knock at her door. Emma looked up to see Sarah, the night nurse she'd grown to trust over the past few days, standing there with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ms. Chen," Sarah began, her voice gentle but carrying an undercurrent of excitement, "I need you to come with me to the nursery. There's something you need to see." Emma's heart jumped to her throat. After having a premature baby, any unexpected request to visit the nursery sent her anxiety spiraling. But there was something in Sarah's eyes, a warmth that suggested this wasn't about bad news. With trembling hands, Emma pushed back her blankets and slipped her feet into the hospital slippers. The walk to the nursery felt like an eternity, each step echoing with memories of the past few days, the terrifying moments of early labor, the relief of hearing her daughter's first cry, and the bittersweet joy of holding her tiny, perfect form while her heart ached for her missing cat. Sarah supported her elbow as they walked, the nurse's steady presence helping to calm Emma's racing thoughts. They paused at the nursery window, and for a moment, Emma couldn't process what she was seeing. There, curled up beside her daughter's crib, was an impossibly familiar figure, a Siamese cat with striking blue eyes and a worn leather collar. "Maestro," she whispered, her voice breaking with disbelief. Through the window, Emma watched as her cat lifted his head at the sound of her voice, those familiar blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Sarah squeezed her arm gently, as tears began rolling down Emma's cheeks. In that moment, everything connected. Her music, her baby, her faithful companion, all the pieces of her life that had seemed scattered just moments ago. As Sarah reached to open the nursery door, Emma realized that sometimes the most beautiful compositions in life weren't played on strings, but on the heartstrings of those we love. Whether they walked on 2 legs or 4, Sarah watched as Emma rushed to Maestro, falling to her knees beside the crib while trying to contain her sobs of joy. The scene before her triggered memories she'd kept locked away for years, memories of another hospital, another night shift, and another unexpected reunion that had changed her life forever. 20 years ago, she had been on the other side of this story, a young mother working double shifts at a diner while struggling to make ends meet. The weight of that memory pressed against her chest as she observed the tender reunion, remembering how life had a way of coming full circle in the most unexpected ways. The next few hours passed in a blur of emotion and necessary protocol. As much as Sarah wanted to let the reunion continue undisturbed, hospital regulations had to be followed. She made calls to hospital administration, documented the incident, and arranged for a vet to check Maestro, all while keeping Emma and her baby together in a private room. The young violinist sat in a rocking chair, her newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, while Maestro purred contentedly at her feet. Something about the scene stirred deep emotions in Sarah, reminding her of the nights she'd spent in a similar chair, dreaming of a better future while her own daughter slept. The parallel wasn't lost on her. How she'd gone from that struggling single mother to becoming the nurse she'd always wanted to be. Dr. Martinez, the night shift pediatrician, proved to be unexpectedly understanding about the situation. After examining both the baby and the cat, she agreed that separating them would cause more stress than allowing them to stay together under supervision. "Sometimes," she said, checking the baby's vitals one last time, "medicine isn't just about following protocols. It's about recognizing what healing really means." Sarah caught the doctor's knowing glance. They'd worked together long enough to understand that healing came in many forms, as they watched Emma humming softly to her baby, while Maestro kept his protective vigil. Both medical professionals silently acknowledged that they were witnessing something special. Emma's story began to unfold as the night progressed. Between gentle rocks of the chair, she shared how she'd rescued Maestro from a shelter the day she got her position with the orchestra. "He used to sit beside me during every practice session," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "When I got pregnant, he would purr against my belly whenever I played. It was like he was trying to tell me everything would be okay." Sarah listened, remembering her own support system, not a cat, but an elderly neighbor who had watched her daughter while she attended nursing school. Different circumstances, same thread of unexpected kindness that made survival possible. The parallels between their stories grew stronger with each shared detail. As dawn approached, casting long shadows through the hospital windows, Sarah found herself sharing her own story with Emma. She told her about the years of struggle, about finding her calling in nursing after experiencing firsthand how much difference a caring medical professional could make. Sometimes the hardest moments in our lives lead us exactly where we need to be," she said, adjusting the baby's blanket. Emma nodded, understanding flooding her eyes as she looked down at her daughter, then at Maestro and finally at Sarah. In that moment, 3 generations of care and connection converged. The seasoned nurse, the new mother, and the tiny baby, all watched over by a cat who had traveled across the city to maintain his vigil. The morning shift arrived with its usual flurry of activity, but today felt different. Word of the midnight visitor had spread through the hospital staff like a gentle wave, bringing smiles to tired faces. Dr. Anderson, the chief of pediatrics, arrived earlier than usual. His curiosity piqued by the unusual reports from the night shift. He found Sarah completing her charts at the nurse's station, her face showing the fatigue of a night filled with more emotion than usual. As she briefed him on the situation, he noticed how her eyes lit up when describing the connection between mother, child, and the mysterious feline visitor. Having worked with Sarah for over a decade, he recognized the rare moments when she allowed herself to be moved by the human stories that unfolded within these walls. Emma dozed lightly in her hospital room, one hand resting protectively on her baby's portable crib, the other dangling near Maestro, who hadn't left their side. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, creating patterns that danced across the floor and caught the sparkle of tears that occasionally escaped down her cheeks. The reality of being a single mother had been weighing heavily on her mind, but somehow the return of Maestro had restored a sense of completeness to her world. She thought about the upcoming orchestra season, the responsibilities awaiting her at home and the challenges ahead. But now, with her faithful companion back and the unexpected friendship forming with Sarah, those challenges seemed less daunting. The sound of her baby's soft breathing mixed with Maestro's purrs created a new kind of symphony, one of hope and possibility. Sarah returned to the room just as Emma was attempting to position herself to nurse, something she still struggled with given her daughter's premature status. Without a word, Sarah adjusted the pillows and guided Emma's arms into a more comfortable position. As the baby latched on successfully, both women shared a smile of triumph. "You remind me so much of myself," Sarah admitted softly, checking the IV line with practiced ease. Although my story didn't have such an elegant cat as a supporting character. Emma looked up, curious to hear more about this woman who had become more than just another nurse during this extraordinary night. The morning sun highlighted the silver strands in Sarah's dark hair, evidence of years spent caring for others through their most vulnerable moments. The conversation flowed naturally as Sarah shared more about her journey, from waitressing while studying for her nursing degree to finally standing on her own 2 feet. Emma listened intently, recognizing the strength it took to reshape one's life while caring for a child alone. "Music was my escape," Emma confessed, "but sometimes I wonder if it's selfish to pursue my dreams now that I'm responsible for another life." Sarah's response was immediate and firm, born from years of experience. "Our children don't need us to sacrifice our dreams. They need us to show them how to chase them." The words hung in the air, weighted with truth and understanding. Maestro, as if sensing the importance of the moment, moved closer to Emma's feet, his presence a constant reminder of unexpected blessings. As the morning progressed, Dr. Anderson returned to discuss Emma's discharge plan. Given the baby's premature status, they would need to stay a few more days for observation. Emma's relief was evident. She wasn't quite ready to face the world outside these protective walls. Sarah, who had been organizing the discharge paperwork, paused to watch the interaction. She saw in Emma the same determination she'd once felt, the same mix of fear and courage that came with facing an uncertain future. The morning light caught the tears in Emma's eyes as she listened to the doctor's instructions, but these were different tears than the ones from last night. These were tears of strength, of knowing that somehow everything would work out. Maestro stretched lazily in his spot by the crib, completely at home in this sterile environment that had somehow become a sanctuary for all of them. The pediatric ward's routine was disrupted in the most beautiful way when Emma brought her violin to the hospital that afternoon. After a long discussion with Dr. Anderson, who recognized the therapeutic potential, she was granted permission to play in a private family room, away from the main nursery. Sarah helped arrange everything, carefully transferring the baby's portable monitoring equipment, while Maestro followed dutifully behind them. The violin case, which Emma hadn't opened since the night she went into labor, held more than just an instrument. It contained her identity, her passion, her way of expressing everything words couldn't say. As she lifted the violin from its velvet bed, her fingers trembled slightly, both from excitement and the lingering weakness of her recent delivery. A small audience had gathered outside the family room, nurses, doctors, and parents drawn by the sound of Emma tuning her violin. Sarah sat in a comfortable chair near the baby's portable crib. Maestro curled at her feet as if he'd known her all his life. Emma stood by the window, her posture transforming as she raised the violin to her chin. No longer just a new mother, but an artist ready to share her gift. The first notes of Bach's Air on G-string floated through the air, soft and tentative at first, then growing in confidence. The baby, who had been fussy all morning, settled immediately at the familiar sound. Sarah watched in amazement as tiny fists unclenched, and breathing patterns settled into a peaceful rhythm that matched the music's gentle flow. Dr. Martinez slipped into the room during the second piece, her usually hurried steps slowing, as Beethoven's Romance in F major filled the space. She had come to check the baby's vital signs, but found herself trapped by the music's spell. The monitors showed what everyone could sense. The premature infant's heart rate and oxygen levels were the best they'd been since birth. Emma played with her eyes closed, swaying slightly as her fingers danced across the strings, each note carrying years of dedication and love. Maestro's tail moved in perfect time with the music, his blue eyes fixed on the baby as if he were a tiny conductor, ensuring everything stayed in harmony. The scene before them was more than just a mother playing for her child. It was a moment of pure healing. Word of the impromptu concert spread through the hospital with remarkable speed. Parents from other floors began asking when Emma would play again, their own children showing marked improvement after hearing the music drift through the corridors. Sarah, watching all of this unfold, saw an opportunity forming, a way for Emma to merge her two worlds rather than having to choose between them. During a break between pieces, she shared her idea with Dr. Anderson, who had joined the growing audience. A regular music program for the pediatric ward. Emma's eyes lit up at the suggestion, her mind already racing with possibilities. The violin in her hands no longer felt like a reminder of a life she might have to leave behind, but rather a bridge to something new and meaningful. The afternoon light was fading when Emma finally lowered her violin. The baby had slept peacefully through the entire performance, and Maestro had maintained his protective position nearby, occasionally adding his own purring accompaniment to the music. As Sarah helped Emma pack up her violin, they discussed the future, not with fear or uncertainty, but with growing excitement. "Sometimes," Sarah said, carefully closing the violin case, "life's greatest challenges lead us to our true purpose." Emma nodded, understanding flooding her face as she looked at her sleeping daughter. In just a few days, her world had been completely transformed, but as she watched Maestro stretch and move to check on the baby, she realized that sometimes the best things in life come from embracing the unexpected changes rather than fighting them. The following days brought a subtle but profound change to the pediatric ward. Emma's daily violin sessions became an anticipated event, drawing parents and staff from all corners of the hospital. A routine began to form. Every afternoon at 3, she would set up in the family room. Maestro would take his place near the baby's crib, and the healing power of music would fill the air. Dr. Anderson had worked with the hospital board to create an official position for Emma, music therapy coordinator for the pediatric ward. It wasn't the same as being first violin in the orchestra, but as Emma watched the positive effects her music had on the tiny patients, she realized she had found something equally meaningful. The board even agreed to make an exception to their strict no-pets policy, granting Maestro special therapy animal status. After observing his calming effect on the infants, Sarah found herself staying past her shift more often than not, helping Emma coordinate these impromptu concerts while sharing her years of experience in navigating hospital bureaucracy. Today they sat together during Emma's break, watching as a young father cradled his sick toddler, the child's pain momentarily forgotten in the lingering echoes of Emma's last piece. "I never thought I'd find purpose in my setback," Emma confessed, gently rocking her own daughter who was growing stronger each day. "When I went into premature labor, I thought my music career was over." Sarah smiled, remembering her own moments of doubt decades ago. "Life has a way of opening new doors when old ones close," she replied, watching as Maestro moved between the babies in the room, seemingly aware of which one needed his comfort most at any given moment. The afternoon took an unexpected turn when Catherine Moore, the hospital's most prominent benefactor, walked into the family room during Emma's performance of Dvorak's humoresque. Mrs. Moore, known for her stern demeanor and high expectations, stood silently in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Emma continued playing, but Sarah could see the tension in her shoulders as she drew her bow across the strings. The wealthy patron had been instrumental in funding the hospital's new neonatal unit, and her opinion carried significant weight with the board. As the last notes faded away, Mrs. Moore remained still, her eyes moving from Emma to the peaceful infants to Maestro, who had positioned himself protectively between his family and the newcomer. The silence stretched taut as a violin string. Finally, Mrs. Moore spoke, her voice carrying years of authority. "In all my years of supporting this hospital, I've never seen anything quite like this." She paused, and Sarah felt her heart race, knowing how much Emma's new position meant to her friend. But then something remarkable happened. Mrs. Moore smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her entire face. "My late husband was a cellist," she revealed, moving further into the room. "He always said music had the power to heal what medicine couldn't reach." The tension in the room dissolved as Mrs. Moore approached Emma, who still held her violin close like a shield. "I would like to discuss expanding this program," the benefactor continued. "Perhaps we could create a proper music therapy department with multiple musicians and—" She paused, looking at Maestro with unexpected warmth. "They're therapeutic companions." Hope bloomed in Emma's eyes as she listened to Mrs. Moore outline her vision. Sarah watched from her corner, feeling a familiar warmth spread through her chest, the same feeling she'd had years ago when her own life had taken an unexpected but wonderful turn. Through the window, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor, and in that golden light, Sarah could see the pieces of Emma's future falling into place. The young violinist was no longer just a single mother struggling to find her way. She was becoming something more, as a healer in her own right. Using her gift to touch lives in ways she never imagined possible, Maestro purred loudly from his spot near the baby's crib, as if giving his approval to the plans being made. The morning of Emma's discharge from the hospital arrived with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Her daughter, now strong enough to go home, slept peacefully in her carrier, while Maestro maintained his vigilant watch nearby. The small hospital room that had been their sanctuary for the past week was filled with flowers, cards, and, most telling of all, a thick folder of music therapy program proposals from Mrs. Moore. Sarah arrived early, officially off duty but present as a friend, helping Emma pack while sharing last-minute advice about caring for a premature baby. The younger woman's hands trembled slightly as she folded tiny onesies, each movement betraying her nervousness about facing the world outside these protective walls. Mrs. Moore had been busy during the past few days, laying the groundwork for what she called the Healing Notes Initiative. The program would start small, just Emma and her violin for now, but with plans to expand as they documented the positive effects of music therapy on patient recovery. Emma's new schedule would allow her to care for her daughter while continuing her work at the hospital, a perfect balance she hadn't dared hope for. "Sometimes the universe has better plans for us than we have for ourselves," Sarah remarked, helping Emma pack the last of her things. The words carried the weight of personal experience, and Emma found herself clinging to them like a lifeline. Maestro weaved between their legs, somehow managing to supervise both the packing process and the sleeping baby. Dr. Anderson stopped by with the final discharge papers, his usual professional demeanor softened by genuine warmth. "You came here as a patient," he said, handing Emma the documents. "And you're leaving as an essential part of our healing team." The words brought tears to Emma's eyes as she remembered the fear and uncertainty of that first night, how she'd thought everything was falling apart when really it was falling into place. Sarah watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. Remembering her own journey from patient to caregiver, the morning light streamed through the window, catching the tears on Emma's cheeks and transforming them into tiny prisms. Even Maestro seemed to understand the significance of the moment, sitting regally beside the carrier as if ready to escort his family to their new life. The walk to the hospital entrance felt both longer and shorter than it should have. Every few steps, someone stopped them to say goodbye or to express excitement about the upcoming music therapy program. Emma carried her violin case in one hand and her daughter's carrier in the other, while Sarah handled the rest of their belongings. Maestro padded alongside them, his blue eyes alert to every movement around his precious charges. At the entrance, Mrs. Moore waited with an unexpected surprise, a dedicated parking space near the staff entrance, and a modified schedule that would allow Emma to ease into her new role while adjusting to motherhood. The older woman's normally stern expression had softened considerably since their first meeting, as if Emma's music had awakened something long dormant in her heart. Standing in the morning sun, Sarah helped Emma settle the baby into her car, while Maestro supervised from his designated spot in the back seat. The past week had changed all their lives in unexpected ways. Emma had found a new purpose, Mrs. Moore had rediscovered her passion for the healing arts, and Sarah had gained what she knew would be a lifelong friend as they said their goodbyes, with promises to meet for coffee, before Emma's first official day as music therapy coordinator. Sarah was reminded once again how life's greatest challenges often led to its greatest blessings. She watched Emma's car pull away, Maestro's silhouette visible in the back window, still maintaining his protective vigil. The hospital loomed behind them, no longer just a place of medicine, but a place where music and healing would now dance together. Emma's apartment felt different as she stepped through the door for the first time in over a week. The sheet music still scattered across her coffee table, the half-empty teacup on the kitchen counter. Everything was exactly as she'd left it the night she went into labor, yet everything had changed. Sunlight streamed through the bay window where she used to practice, casting warm patterns on the hardwood floor. Maestro immediately began his inspection of the apartment, moving from room to room as if checking that everything was in order. His familiar routine brought a sense of normalcy to this surreal homecoming. Emma stood in the middle of her living room, holding her sleeping daughter's carrier, overwhelmed by the simple fact that she was now responsible for this tiny human being. The preparations Sarah had helped her with proved invaluable during those first few hours at home. The nurse had insisted on making detailed lists and schedules. Knowing how overwhelming the transition could be, Emma followed them methodically, setting up the portable crib next to her bed, organizing the premature baby supplies within easy reach, preparing bottles according to the special instructions from the hospital. Maestro supervised every step, his presence a constant comfort as Emma navigated her new reality. When the baby woke hungry, Emma found herself automatically following Sarah's instructions about proper feeding positions for preemies, grateful for the careful guidance her friend had provided. The afternoon passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and quiet moments of wonder as evening approached. Emma felt the first real pangs of anxiety about spending the night alone with her daughter. In the hospital, help had always been just a button press away. Now, sitting in her favorite armchair with her baby cradled against her chest, she felt the full weight of her responsibility. But then something magical happened. Maestro jumped onto the arm of the chair, purring softly, and the baby responded with a contented sigh. Emma reached for her violin, propped nearby, and began to play a gentle lullaby. The familiar motion of bow against strings centered her, and as the music filled the apartment, she felt her anxiety melting away. This was her new symphony. The sound of her violin, her daughter's peaceful breathing, and Maestro's rhythmic purring all blending together in perfect harmony. A text message from Sarah provided the final reassurance Emma needed that evening. "Remember, you're stronger than you know. Call me any time." The simple message brought tears to her eyes as she prepared for their first night at home. She'd arranged the bedroom exactly as Sarah had suggested, with everything she might need within arm's reach. Maestro had already claimed his spot at the foot of the portable crib, clearly taking his guardian duties seriously. As Emma went through her daughter's evening care routine, she found herself humming the pieces she planned to play at the hospital next week. The music therapy program gave her something to look forward to, a way to combine her love of music with her new role as a mother. Mrs. Moore had even arranged for a small practice room to be converted into a private space where Emma could keep her daughter close while working. The night settled around them like a gentle blanket as Emma rocked her daughter to sleep. The city lights twinkled through her window, a familiar sight that now held new meaning. She thought about how different her life was from what she'd planned. She wasn't preparing for her debut as first violin, but instead was embarking on an entirely different kind of performance. Yet somehow, sitting there in the soft lamplight, her daughter sleeping peacefully while Maestro kept watch, she felt more complete than she ever had before. The music stand by her window now held lullabies instead of concertos, and her scheduled practice times would revolve around feeding sessions rather than orchestra rehearsals. But as she gazed down at her sleeping daughter, Emma realized that sometimes life's most beautiful music comes from the songs we never expected to play. The first week at home established a delicate rhythm. Emma discovered that motherhood, like music, required timing, patience, and the ability to adapt when things didn't go as planned. Her daughter, whom she had finally named Melody, seemed to thrive in their home environment, gaining weight steadily and showing more alertness with each passing day. Every morning began with what Emma called their sunrise sonata. She would feed Melody while watching the sun rise over the city skyline. Maestro perched on the windowsill like a dutiful guardian. These quiet moments, filled with soft purrs and gentle baby sounds, became the foundation of their new routine, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. These peaceful morning moments reminded Emma that she was exactly where she needed to be. Sarah's daily check-in calls became an essential part of their schedule. The experienced nurse had an uncanny ability to sense when Emma needed encouragement, often calling just as doubts began to creep in. Today's call found Emma practicing her violin while Melody napped, preparing for her first official day as music therapy coordinator. "The key is to start small," Sarah advised, her voice warm with understanding. "Remember how you learned to play violin, one note at a time." The comparison helped settle Emma's nerves as she reviewed the simple arrangements she'd prepared for her first sessions. Maestro, who had appointed himself official music critic, sat attentively during her practice sessions, his tail twitching in time with the gentler pieces she now favored. Mrs. Moore's influence had transformed a former storage room near the pediatric ward into a cozy studio space. Through video calls, Emma had watched the room take shape. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, and even a small area designated for Melody's portable crib. The wealthy patron had thought of everything, ensuring that Emma could balance her new role with motherhood. This afternoon, Sarah had stopped by to help Emma organize her music sheets and baby supplies in preparation for their return to the hospital. As they worked, Emma shared her fears about managing it all, but Sarah's steady presence and practical advice helped transform anxiety into anticipation. "You're not just playing for an audience anymore," Sarah reminded her. "You're playing for healing." The evening brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Martinez had stopped by on her way home, carrying a small care package and eager to see how her tiniest patient was progressing. The pediatrician's visit turned into an impromptu dinner, with Emma discovering that balancing a bowl of soup while holding Melody was yet another skill she needed to master. As they talked, Dr. Martinez shared stories of other premature babies she'd treated who were now thriving toddlers. The doctor's presence filled Emma's apartment with warm laughter and practical encouragement, helping to drive away the isolation that sometimes crept in during long days alone with a newborn. Even Maestro seemed to approve, abandoning his usual reserve to rub against the doctor's legs appreciatively. Later that night, as Emma prepared for bed, she found herself drawn to the violin case propped in the corner. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, her first official day as part of the hospital staff, her first time managing Melody outside the safety of their home routine. The familiar weight of the violin in her hands brought comfort as she played a quiet melody, something new she'd been composing during late-night feedings. It was different from anything she'd written before, incorporating the gentle rhythms of her daughter's breathing and Maestro's purrs. As the last notes faded into the night air, Emma felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. The life she'd planned might have changed, but the music hadn't stopped. It had simply transformed into something richer, deeper, and more meaningful than she could have imagined. Morning arrived with a mix of September sunshine and nervous energy as Emma prepared for her first official day at the hospital. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, but the reality of managing a baby bag, violin case, and carrier, while Maestro weaved between her legs, proved more challenging than anticipated. The morning routine she'd carefully planned took twice as long as expected, yet somehow, watching Melody's peaceful face as she slept through the preparations helped calm Emma's racing heart. She chose her outfit carefully, professional but comfortable enough for the long day ahead, and packed extra everything, Sarah's voice echoing in her head about being over-prepared rather than caught off guard. The hospital's side entrance, now accessible with her new staff badge, felt different from the times she'd entered as a patient. Mrs. Moore had arranged for a small welcome committee, Sarah, of course, having arrived early on her day off to help Emma settle in, and Dr. Anderson, whose warm smile helped ease the butterflies in Emma's stomach. The converted music therapy room exceeded her expectations. Soft, natural lighting, comfortable seating arranged in a semicircle, and, most importantly, A safe, quiet corner, equipped with everything Melody might need. Maestro immediately began his inspection of the space, paying special attention to the window seats that would clearly become his favorite observation posts. The room somehow managed to feel both medical and musical, with its carefully balanced blend of hospital efficiency and artistic warmth. The first session was scheduled with the parents of twins in the NICU, both born 2 months premature. Emma felt her hands trembling slightly as she unpacked her violin. But then something remarkable happened. As she began to tune the instrument, Melody made a soft cooing sound from her carrier, and the familiar routine of preparing to play took over. Sarah, who had positioned herself near Melody's corner, gave an encouraging nod. Emma drew her bow across the strings. Beginning with Bach's Air on G string, the same piece that had first revealed music's healing power in the pediatric ward, the twins' parents, exhausted from weeks of worry, visibly relaxed as the music filled the room. Maestro, ever attuned to the emotional atmosphere, moved quietly between the visitors, offering his own brand of comfort. Throughout the day, Emma discovered a natural rhythm to her new role. Between sessions, she tended to Melody, whose presence seemed to create an instant connection with the worried parents who came to the music therapy room. Many of them found comfort not just in the music, but in seeing Emma's own premature baby thriving. Sarah stopped by periodically, her experienced hands helping with both baby care and program coordination. The most touching moment came when a young father, whose daughter had been in the NICU for 3 months, requested a specific lullaby, the same one Emma had played during her impromptu concerts the week before. As she played, she watched tears of relief roll down his face, and she understood with crystal clarity why this new path had chosen her. The end of her first day found Emma in her new office space, nursing Melody while reviewing notes for tomorrow's sessions. Maestro dozed nearby, having completed his duties as therapy cat extraordinaire. Sarah appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea, a knowing smile on her face. "So how does it feel?" she asked, setting 1 cup within Emma's reach. The question brought unexpected tears to Emma's eyes, not tears of sadness or overwhelm, but of profound gratitude. Looking around at this space that somehow perfectly merged her 2 worlds, mother and musician, Emma finally found the words. "It feels like coming home." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, and in that moment, Emma realized that sometimes life's most beautiful music comes from the very changes we once feared the most. As autumn painted the city in warm colors, Emma's music therapy program blossomed in ways no one had anticipated. Word spread through the hospital about the violinist and her gentle cat, who brought comfort to the pediatric ward, and soon other departments began requesting sessions. Today marked 1 month since she'd started, and her schedule was filled with both individual and group sessions. The morning light filtered through the therapy room windows as Emma prepared for her first appointment, a group session with 3 families from the oncology ward. She adjusted Melody's blanket in her carrier while reviewing her music selections, grateful that her daughter had settled into their routine so seamlessly. Maestro had already taken his position by the window, his blue eyes tracking every movement in the room with characteristic attention. Mrs. Moore's latest visit had brought exciting news. The hospital board had unanimously approved funding for program expansion. Emma would soon be joined by a cellist and a pianist, allowing them to offer a broader range of musical experiences. The thought of building a team both excited and intimidated her, but Sarah's steady guidance helped keep her grounded. "You've created something special here," Sarah had told her during their morning coffee. "Now it's time to let it grow." The truth of those words resonated as Emma watched the oncology families file in, their faces brightening at the sight of Maestro greeting each person with his particular brand of feline diplomacy. These sessions had become about more than just music. They were about creating a space where healing could happen in unexpected ways. The session unfolded with an intensity Emma hadn't anticipated. A teenage patient requested Tchaikovsky, the same composer Emma had been practicing when her own life changed so dramatically. As she played, she noticed the girl's mother crying silently, her hand clutched in her daughter's. Without breaking the music, Emma modulated into a gentler piece, one she'd composed during late-night feedings with Melody. The transition created a ripple effect through the room. Tensions eased, breathing deepened, and even Maestro, who had been making his rounds, settled near the teenage patient with a comforting purr. Melody, usually asleep during morning sessions, watched with wide eyes from her carrier, as if sensing the significance of the moment. In her first month as music therapy coordinator, Emma had learned that healing often came in these quiet moments of connection. Between sessions, Emma found time to work on her program notes, documenting the impact of music on patient recovery rates. The data was promising: reduced anxiety levels, improved sleep patterns, and in some cases, decreased need for pain medication. Dr. Anderson had become one of her strongest advocates, often stopping by to share his observations of patients' progress. Today, he brought another piece of news. A medical journal was interested in publishing a paper about their innovative approach to patient care. As Emma nursed Melody in her office while discussing the article with him, she marveled at how naturally her two worlds had merged. The office walls were now decorated with both medical charts and sheet music, while one corner housed both a professional violin stand and a baby-changing station. Maestro supervised from his perch atop a filing cabinet, his presence adding a touch of home to the professional space. The afternoon brought a special moment that crystallized everything Emma had been working toward. A former NICU mother returned for a visit, her now healthy 3-month-old cradled in her arms. She had been one of Emma's first patients, attending sessions during her baby's critical first weeks. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she shared how Emma's music had given her hope during the darkest hours of her NICU stay. As they talked, both babies cooed at each other while Maestro maintained his protective watch. Sarah, passing by on her rounds, stopped to witness the reunion. The scene before them: 2 mothers, 2 thriving babies, music stands ready for the next session, and a contented therapy cat, represented everything their program aimed to achieve. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about creating a community of healing, hope, and understanding. The interview with potential new team members took place on a crisp October morning. Emma had arranged the therapy room thoughtfully, with Melody contentedly playing in her baby seat, while Maestro assumed his usual position of authority nearby. Thomas Chen, a talented cellist who had recently completed his music therapy certification, sat before her with an obvious nervousness that reminded Emma of her own first days. As he unpacked his cello, his hands trembling slightly, Maestro did something unprecedented. He approached the musician and settled at his feet, purring loudly. The tension in the room immediately dissipated, and when Thomas began to play Bach's cello suite, No. 1, Emma knew she had found her first team member. His gentle way with the instrument spoke of someone who understood that music was about healing, not just performance. Later that afternoon, Rachel Martinez, their prospective pianist, demonstrated a natural ability to connect with patients that exceeded even Emma's hopes. During her trial session with a group of pediatric patients, Rachel improvised a playful melody that had the children giggling and participating enthusiastically. Emma watched from her corner, cradling Melody while making notes as Rachel seamlessly integrated musical games with therapy objectives. The young pianist had previously worked in a children's hospital in Boston, and her experience showed in every interaction. Even Maestro, typically reserved with newcomers, seemed to approve. Watching the session with evident interest from his window perch, Sarah, who had slipped in to observe, caught Emma's eye and nodded. They both knew the team was coming together perfectly. The day's most touching moment came during a joint session where Emma and Thomas played together for the first time. They had chosen to work with a young patient recovering from extensive surgery, a 7-year-old girl named Sophie, who hadn't smiled in weeks according to her chart. As violin and cello blended in a gentle duet, something magical happened. Sophie's face lit up, and she asked if she could conduct them. Emma and Thomas followed the child's uncertain gestures, letting her guide the tempo and dynamics of their playing. Melody, who had been dozing in her carrier, awakened and watched with fascination as the music filled the room. Maestro, ever attuned to emotional atmospheres, positioned himself near Sophie's chair, his presence adding another layer of comfort to the session. When Sophie's mother began crying quietly in the corner, they were tears of joy at seeing her daughter engaged and happy for the first time in months. Progress meetings with Mrs. Moore had become weekly occurrences, and today's meeting held special significance. The wealthy patron sat in Emma's office, holding Melody while discussing plans for a dedicated music therapy wing. "We've seen remarkable results in just these few months," Mrs. Moore said, her usually business-like demeanor softened by the baby in her arms. "The board wants to establish this as a permanent program." Emma listened intently while reviewing the proposed floor plans, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. The new space would include 3 therapy rooms, a small performance area for group sessions, and even a special room designed for their youngest patients, featuring a viewing window where anxious parents could watch without disturbing sessions. As they discussed the details, Maestro sat attentively on the desk, occasionally pawing at the blueprints, as if offering his own suggestions for improvements. As evening approached, Emma found herself alone in the therapy room with her small family, reflecting on the day's events. She played her violin softly while Melody drifted to sleep, the baby's peaceful expression mirroring the contentment Emma felt in her heart. Thomas and Rachel would start officially next week. Marking the beginning of a new chapter in the program's growth, Sarah had already begun coordinating with other departments to schedule additional therapy sessions, and Dr. Anderson was collecting data for a comprehensive study on music therapy's impact on recovery rates. Standing by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Emma realized that her life had expanded in ways she never could have imagined. That frightening night when she went into premature labor, Maestro stretched lazily before making his evening rounds of the room, his routine a comforting constant in their ever-evolving journey. The first performance of the complete music therapy team coincided with Melody's 3-month checkup. The morning began early, with Emma dressing her daughter in a special outfit Sarah had given her. Tiny musical notes embroidered on soft cotton. Dr. Martinez's examination confirmed what Emma's heart already knew. Melody had exceeded all expectations for a premature baby, growing strong and alert under the constant love of her mother and the vigilant watch of Maestro. The doctor's office filled with proud smiles as Melody grabbed at her stethoscope, cooing with curiosity. "Music and love," Dr. Martinez observed. "Martinez, the best medicine we could have prescribed." After the appointment, Emma hurried to the therapy wing where Thomas and Rachel were already setting up for their inaugural group session. The new therapy wing hummed with anticipation as families began arriving for the special program. Emma had carefully selected pieces that showcased how different instruments could work together to create healing environments. The room, designed with perfect acoustics, held a baby grand piano for Rachel, comfortable seating for patients and families, and the large observation window that had proven invaluable for anxious parents of younger patients. Melody watched from her special corner, attended by Sarah, who had taken her break to be present for this milestone. Maestro, sensing the importance of the occasion, positioned himself centrally, his blue eyes tracking every movement as the room filled with excited whispers and expectant faces. Their performance began with Emma and Thomas playing a duet they had composed specifically for the pediatric ward, a gentle piece that incorporated sounds of nature and lullabies. Rachel joined in seamlessly, her piano adding depth and warmth to the melody. The effect on their audience was immediate and profound. A young cancer patient who had been withdrawn for weeks began swaying to the music. A mother whose baby was recovering from heart surgery wept silently, cradling her infant closer as the music wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Even the hospital staff who had stopped to listen through the doorway seemed transformed, the tension of their busy day melting away. Maestro moved quietly among the audience, offering his special brand of comfort to those who needed it most. During a brief intermission, Emma nursed Melody, while discussing the morning's success with her team. Thomas shared his observations about how different patients responded to various instruments, while Rachel suggested incorporating simple percussion instruments for interactive sessions with the children. The easy camaraderie between them felt natural, as if they had been working together for years rather than days. Mrs. Moore, who had slipped in quietly during their performance, approached with tears in her eyes. "This," she said, gesturing to the room filled with peaceful faces and healing hearts, "is exactly what my husband would have wanted his money to support." She reached down to scratch Maestro's ears as he wound around her ankles, his purr adding to the symphony of contentment that filled the room. As the day drew to a close, Emma found herself back in her office, now a warm space filled with photographs of healing moments, children conducting their own music sessions, babies peaceful in their mother's arms, and even one of Maestro curled up with a young patient during a particularly challenging day. Sarah stopped by with tea, a knowing smile on her face as she watched Emma gently rock Melody while reviewing notes for tomorrow's sessions. "You've created something beautiful here," she observed. Settling into the comfortable chair they'd placed specifically for their end-of-day chats, Emma looked around at her expanded family, her growing daughter, her faithful feline companion, her talented colleagues and her dearest friend, and felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The music of her life had found its perfect rhythm, different from what she'd originally planned, but somehow richer and more meaningful than she could have imagined. 6 months had passed since Emma's unexpected journey began, and winter had wrapped the city in a gentle blanket of snow. The morning light filtered through frosted windows as she prepared the therapy wing for a special visit. Representatives from 3 major hospitals had come to observe their program, hoping to replicate its success. Melody, now a robust 6-month-old who smiled at everyone she met, sat contentedly in her baby seat, watching her mother tune her violin. The infant's dark curls and bright eyes reminded Emma so much of herself, especially the way Melody's tiny hands reached out whenever music filled the room. Maestro, now officially the most famous therapy cat in the city's medical community, maintained his dignified presence from his favorite windowsill, occasionally glancing at the gathering observers with mild interest. The demonstration session showcased the full scope of what they had built. Emma, Thomas, and Rachel performed together, their instruments weaving a tapestry of healing sounds, while Dr. Anderson presented the remarkable data they had collected. Patient recovery times had improved significantly in units where music therapy was integrated into treatment plans. The NICU, in particular, had seen extraordinary results. Premature babies exposed to regular music sessions showed better weight gain and more stable vital signs. Sarah, who had become the program's strongest advocate among the nursing staff, shared powerful testimonials from families whose lives had been touched by the therapy. Through it all, Melody watched with unusual focus for a baby her age, her eyes following every movement of her mother's bow across the strings. Even the visiting doctors noticed her engagement, commenting on how the infant seemed to be conducting her own tiny symphony. The afternoon brought an unexpected reunion that touched everyone's hearts. Sophie, the young girl who had found her smile again through their music, returned for a visit with news. Her latest scans showed she was cancer-free. She immediately went to the piano, where Rachel had been teaching her simple melodies during her treatment, and played a wobbly but recognizable "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The visiting medical professionals watched in amazement as other young patients gathered around the piano, creating an impromptu concert that filled the therapy wing with joy. Emma felt tears welling up as she watched Sophie teach another patient where to place his fingers on the keys. The same girl who had barely spoken 6 months ago was now confidently sharing her love of music with others. Maestro, who had maintained a special bond with Sophie throughout her treatment, sat regally beside the piano as if supervising the entire proceedings. Mrs. Moore's vision for the program had exceeded everyone's expectations. The therapy wing had become a place where healing happened in unexpected ways, where children forgot their pain long enough to sing, where worried parents found moments of peace, and where even the most skeptical medical professionals witnessed the undeniable power of music to heal both body and spirit. Today, as Emma demonstrated how they worked with their youngest patients, she caught sight of Melody reaching toward her violin with recognition in her eyes. Thomas quickly picked up the melody Emma was playing, his cello providing a gentle foundation that made the observers lean in closer. Rachel joined seamlessly at the piano, and together they showed how different instruments could create environments tailored to specific healing needs. Sarah, watching from her usual spot near Melody's corner, smiled knowingly. She had been right all those months ago about Emma finding her true purpose. As the day drew to a close and the last of the visitors departed, Emma sat in her office nursing Melody, while Maestro dozed nearby. The winter sunset painted the sky in soft pinks and purples, casting a peaceful glow over the therapy wing. Dr. Anderson stopped by with the latest patient outcome reports, his face beaming with pride at their shared success. "You've started something remarkable here," he said, watching as Melody drifted to sleep in her mother's arms. "These other hospitals won't just be replicating a program, they'll be spreading hope." Emma looked down at her sleeping daughter, then at the photographs covering her office walls, each one telling a story of healing, of music reaching places medicine alone couldn't touch. She thought about the scared young violinist she had been just 6 months ago, rushing to the hospital in premature labor, and marveled at how life's greatest challenges often led to its most beautiful symphonies. 1 year had passed since that fateful night when a frightened violinist rushed to the hospital, her life seemingly falling apart. Now, on a bright spring morning, Emma stood in the expanded therapy wing, preparing for a very special celebration. The hospital was marking the first anniversary of their music therapy program with a small concert featuring patients who had found healing through music. Melody, now a vibrant one-year-old with her mother's musical intuition, sat in Sarah's lap in the front row, clapping her tiny hands with delight as the musicians warmed up. Maestro, his position as therapy cat now legendary throughout the medical community, maintained his dignified watch over the proceedings from his favorite spot near the baby grand piano. The performance space filled with familiar faces, doctors, nurses, patients, and families whose lives had been touched by the program over the past year. Dr. Martinez cradled her own newborn daughter, having chosen to deliver at the hospital specifically because of the music therapy program she had helped nurture. Mrs. Moore sat beside her, the usually stern benefactor's face soft with emotion, as she watched Sophie, now cancer-free for 6 months, confidently take her place at the piano. Thomas adjusted his cello, while Rachel arranged duets with former patients who had discovered their own musical talents during their healing journeys. The room buzzed with anticipation and joy, a testament to how one unexpected moment could spark a revolution in healing. Emma's violin solo brought tears to many eyes as she played the piece she had composed during those early days with Melody. A gentle melody that captured both the fears and hopes of new motherhood. As she played, she caught sight of her daughter swaying in perfect time to the music, one tiny hand reaching toward the violin while the other clutched Sarah's fingers. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day, nurtured by lullabies, healing songs, and the constant love of their extended hospital family. Maestro, as if sensing the significance of the moment, moved to sit beside Melody, his purr adding a subtle harmony to the music. The audience watched in wonder as the small child conducted her mother's playing with surprising accuracy, her natural connection to music already evident. The celebration culminated in a surprise announcement from Mrs. Moore. The program would be expanded to 5 more hospitals across the state, with Emma's team providing training and support. As Emma stood there, holding Melody while surrounded by her musical family, Thomas, Rachel, Sarah, and countless others who had become part of their journey, she felt the perfect symmetry of life's unexpected turns. Dr. Anderson presented data showing how their program had significantly improved patient outcomes, reduced recovery times, and brought healing to places traditional medicine couldn't reach. But the real proof was in the room itself, the young patients playing instruments they had learned during treatment, the parents whose tears of worry had turned to tears of joy, and the medical staff who had witnessed countless moments of breakthrough and healing. As the evening drew to a close, Emma found herself back in the original therapy room where it all began. Melody had fallen asleep in her carrier, one hand still reaching toward her mother's violin case. While Maestro maintained his faithful watch, Sarah joined her carrying 2 cups of tea, a tradition they had maintained through all the changes and growth of the past year. "Did you ever imagine," Sarah asked softly, "that running to the hospital that night would lead to all this?" Emma looked around the room that had become so much more than a workplace. It was where fear had transformed into purpose, where crisis had become opportunity, and where a premature delivery had given birth to not just a child, but to a whole new way of healing. Through the window, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, a reminder that endings often held the seeds of beautiful beginnings. Maestro stretched lazily before settling between them, his presence a constant reminder of how love in all its forms could guide us home. Emma smiled, knowing that while her life's symphony had taken an unexpected turn, it had led her to the most beautiful melody of all, one composed of purpose, love, and the endless possibilities that come when we embrace life's unexpected changes.